Hello, and welcome to Boring Story for Sleep. Settle in and let the weight of the day begin to lift. There is nothing for you to do right now, nothing to solve, nothing to prepare for. The only task before you is to rest, to allow your mind to gently wander, and to feel the steady, rhythmic cadence of your own breath. Take a slow, deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs, a cool, quiet wave. And as you exhale, release it slowly, letting go of any lingering tension you might be holding in your shoulders, your jaw, or your brow. Another deep breath in. It's a long, slow breath out. Let the gentle flow of air be your anchor, a quiet rhythm in the stillness of your room. Tonight, we are not here for excitement or for drama. We are here for the soft, steady unfolding of a story, a journey back in time to a world both familiar and distant. We will travel to a place of marble and dust, of ambition and quiet routine. A city that was the heart of an empire long before it was a ruin. We are going to explore the life and times of Marcus Tullius Cicero, a name you might remember from a history class, a whisper from the ancient past. But we will not rush through his story. We will not focus on the clash of swords or the roar of the crowd. Instead, we will begin by immersing ourselves in the world he inhabited. We will walk the streets he walked, feel the sun on our skin as he might have felt it, and listen to the distant, steady hum of a city teeming with life. Our story is a quiet exploration, a gentle meandering through the daily rhythms, the textures, and the very atmosphere of Republican Rome. It is a story designed to be a soft place for your mind to rest. Interesting enough to hold your attention should you choose to follow it, but calm and measured enough to allow you to drift away whenever you are ready. So adjust your pillow. Let your body feel heavy and relaxed. Allow your eyes to close and simply listen. The story will be here, a gentle current to carry you toward the shores of sleep. Our journey begins not with a grand speech or a momentous battle, but with the simple, everyday reality of the city itself. Rome, a name that echoes with power, with legionaries and emperors. But before all of that, it was a place where people lived and dreamed and worried and went about their day. It was a home. Let us arrive there now, not as historians, but as quiet observers, drifting unseen through its streets. The air itself is thick with 1,000 scents, a complex perfume of existence. Imagine the foundational smell of damp earth and aging stone. The same scent you might find in an old cellar or a quiet ancient church. It is the smell of the city's very bones. Woven into this is the sharp, savory aroma of wood smoke, rising from countless small hearths and bakeries where the daily bread is being prepared. It's a comforting domestic smell, a constant reminder of the life pulsing within these stone walls. And there are other, more organic scents. The fragrance of herbs and spices spills out from the open-fronted market stalls, the sharp temps of rosemary, the sweet perfume of dried figs, and the pungent, earthy smell of garlic and onions. The slightly salty, briny scent of fish, brought in fresh from the port of Ostia, mingles with the sweeter, heavier aroma of wine being decanted from large clay amphorae, and beneath it all, the faint, ever-present scent of livestock. A reminder that this sprawling metropolis is still deeply connected to the countryside that feeds it. The sounds of the city are a symphony of life, a constant low thrum that is never entirely silent. The dominant sound is the murmur of voices. It's not the clamor of a modern city, but a sea of human speech. Mostly in Latin, but peppered with the languages of traders and travelers from across the known world Greek. Punic, the dialects of Gaul and Iberia. It is a soft, continuous background hum. Against this backdrop, you can pick out individual sounds. Goud, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, a steady, patient beat that speaks of craft and labor. The rumble of wooden cartwheels over uneven stone paving, a sound that would have been restricted to the late hours of the night in the city center. But here in the wider districts, it is a part of the daily rhythm. You can hear the gentle bleating of a goat being led through a narrow lane, the clucking of chickens in a hidden courtyard, and the distant, cheerful sound of children's laughter as they play a game with knuckle bones in the shade of a tenement wall. The sharp, percussive cry of a street vendor, advertising his wares, fresh water, hot sausages, or sweet honey cakes, punctuates the air. A familiar and recurring note in the city's song. And then there is the light. The Mediterranean sun is bright and unforgiving, casting sharp, dark shadows that move slowly across the day. The city is a world of stark contrasts, the brilliant, sun-drenched white of a marble temple against the deep, cool darkness of a narrow alleyway. The light filters down into the streets, dappled by the overhang of wooden balconies and the awnings stretched across shop fronts. It illuminates the fine dust that hangs perpetually in the air, a golden haze kicked up by the endless passage of sandaled feet. The textures of this city are under your fingertips. Imagine running your hand along the wall of a building. It is not smooth, but a rough, uneven surface of plaster or tufa block, cool to the touch. The paving stones beneath your feet are worn smooth in the center from centuries of footfalls, but still rugged at the edges. You can feel the rough, homespun wool of a common man's tunic as he brushes past, a stark contrast to the impossibly fine linen of a wealthy matron stola, which whispers as she walks by, attended by her slaves. The world is solid, tangible, and real. This is the Rome that Cicero knew. It's not just a stage for his political ambitions, but a living, breathing entity, a sensory world that shaped his thoughts, his words, and his very being. It is in this city, this intricate tapestry of daily life, that the first threads of his story are woven. And it is here, in the quiet observation of this ordinary world, that we will begin to understand the man and the extraordinary times in which he lived. So, let your mind rest here, in this ancient place. There is no need to follow every detail. Simply allow the sounds, the scents, and the textures of old Rome to form a gentle backdrop for your journey into sleep. Imagine yourself standing in the doorway of a Roman domus, a house belonging to a family of respectable, though not aristocratic, means. It is early morning and the city is just beginning to stir. There is still cool from the night. Carrying the scent of damp stone and the first hints of baking bread from a nearby pistrinum, this house, like so many others, is designed to look inward, away from the noise and the chaos of the street. It is a private sanctuary, a microcosm of the Roman world with its own strict hierarchies and rhythms. The entrance is a narrow, unassuming doorway called the ostium. As you step across the threshold, you find yourself in a short, dark corridor, the fauces. The purpose of this entrance is practical. It keeps the dust and the noise of the street at bay, but it also serves a psychological purpose. To enter a Roman home is to leave the public world behind and enter a private domain. A carefully controlled environment where the family's identity is proudly displayed. On the floor of the fauces, you might see a mosaic, perhaps a simple geometric pattern, or for a family with a sense of humor, a depiction of a guard dog with the words "Cave Canem," beware of the dog. It is the first statement the family makes to a visitor. We are protected. We are established. Moving through the fauces, you emerge into the heart of the home, the atrium. This is the most important public space in the house, and it is here that the family's patriarch, the paterfamilias, would receive his clients and conduct his morning business. The room is large and airy, but not in the way we might think of an open-plan living space today. It is a formal, almost ceremonial room. Your eyes are immediately drawn upward to the compluvium, a large rectangular opening in the center of the roof. Through this opening, the morning light streams down, a single bright column of sun that illuminates the motes of dust dancing in the air. The light is a natural spotlight, and it falls directly onto the impluvium below, a shallow, rectangular pool built into the floor. The impluvium is both beautiful and practical. It is designed to catch the rainwater that falls through the compluvium, channeling it into a cistern below the floor for later use. The water in the pool is still and clear, reflecting the sky above like a dark mirror. The air here is cooler, and the sound of dripping water after a rainfall would have been a gentle, soothing rhythm in the quiet of the morning. The floor around the impluvium is often decorated with intricate mosaic scenes from mythology, images of nature, or abstract patterns that speak to the family's wealth and taste. You can feel the cool, smooth tiles under your feet, a welcome relief from the rough stone of the streets. The walls of the atrium are covered in frescoes, vibrant paintings that bring color and life to the windowless space. These are not just decorations, they are statements of identity. A family might choose scenes that celebrate the virtues of their ancestors, famous mythological tales that reflect their values. or idyllic landscapes that create an illusion of space and nature within the confines of the city. The colors are rich and earthy deep reds, ochre yellows, and verdant greens. Made from ground minerals and pigments, the paint is applied to wet plaster, so the images become a permanent part of the wall itself. In the soft, indirect light, the figures in the frescoes seem to almost move, their painted eyes gazing out into the room with a silent, timeless presence. Arranged around the atrium are the other rooms of the house, their doorways often covered by heavy curtains rather than solid doors. To one side, you would find the cubicula, the small, private bedrooms. These rooms are simple, almost Spartan by our standards. They are small, often just large enough for a bed, a small chest for clothes, and perhaps a single oil lamp. They were not places for socializing or leisure, but simply for sleep. The bed itself is a simple wooden frame with woven leather straps, supporting a mattress stuffed with wool, straw, or feathers, depending on the family's wealth. In the dim light that filters in from the atrium, these rooms feel like quiet, secluded caves, offering a retreat from the more public areas of the house. On another side of the atrium, you would find the tablinum. This was the office of the paterfamilias, his official workspace. It is strategically positioned, connecting the public atrium with the more private garden area at the back of the house. From his chair in the tablinum, the master of the house could command a view of the entire public area, a position of subtle power. The room would contain his writing desk, his scrolls of accounts and correspondence, and perhaps a collection of wax tablets for daily notes. The most important feature of the tablinum, however, is the wax masks of his ancestors. These masks, molded from the faces of the deceased at the time of their death, are kept in small wooden cabinets. They are a powerful, tangible link to the family's lineage, a constant reminder of the duty to uphold the family name and honor the achievements of those who came before. In the quiet of the tablinum, surrounded by the silent, watchful faces of his ancestors, the paterfamilias would make the decisions that shaped his family's destiny. While the men are engaged in the business of the city, the matrona, the lady of the house, oversees the domestic sphere. Her domain is the household, and her authority within it is absolute. Her morning would be spent supervising the slaves in their tasks, weaving, cooking, cleaning, and managing the household stores. Weaving was a particularly important activity for a Roman woman of high standing. It was seen as a mark of traditional virtue and domestic skill. In the peristyle, you might see the loom, a large wooden frame where the women of the household, both free and slave, would work together, their hands moving with a practiced rhythmic grace, the gentle click-clack of the shuttle, a constant domestic sound. The children of the household would begin their education. For a boy from a wealthy family like Cicero's, a private tutor, often a highly educated Greek slave, would arrive at the house. The lessons would focus on rhetoric, literature, history, and philosophy. The goal was not just to impart knowledge, but to train the boy for a future in public life, to teach him how to speak persuasively, to argue logically, and to carry himself with the authority expected of a Roman leader. The sound of a young boy reciting lines from Homer or practicing a speech would be a familiar part of the morning soundscape. Girls, too, would receive an education, but it would be focused on preparing them to run their own households one day. They would learn to read, write, and manage accounts, skills essential for a future matrona. As the morning progresses, the city outside the walls of the domas becomes a hive of activity. The streets, narrow and winding, are thronged with people. This is not a city of grand open boulevards. Most streets are little more than cramped alleyways, packed with pedestrians. The noise is a constant, overwhelming roar. The cries of street vendors, the chatter of shoppers, the hammering of craftsmen, the braying of a donkey, all merge into a single, cacophonous whole. The Roman Forum, the great open space that was the heart of the city, would be the epicenter of this activity. It was the political, commercial, and social hub of the Roman world. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of the Forum, watching the scene unfold. The space is vast, but it is filled with people, a constantly moving river of white togas. On the steps of the great basilica's huge colonnaded halls, businessmen negotiate deals, their voices low and serious. Lawyers, like Cicero himself, meet with their clients, preparing for the day's cases in the courts. Moneylenders sit at their small tables, the clinking of coins a sharp metallic sound. Politicians, surrounded by a crowd of their supporters, move through the forum, their progress slow and deliberate. They stop to greet potential voters, their hands outstretched, a practiced smile on their faces. The air is thick with ambition and intrigue. You can almost feel the restless energy of a society obsessed with politics and power. In the open square, orators practice their speeches, their voices ringing out over the crowd, hoping to attract an audience. The art of public speaking was the key to success in Rome, and the forum was the ultimate stage. But the forum was not just for the elite. It was also a marketplace, a place of commerce and entertainment. Around the edges of the square, shops and stalls sell everything from luxury goods, fine pottery, coated silks, exotic spices, to everyday necessities. The smells of the market are overwhelming. The sharp, pungent scent of a cheese stall, the sweet aroma of a honey cake vendor, the earthy smell of fresh vegetables, and the metallic tang of a butcher's shop all compete for your attention. The Suburra, the densely populated residential district that lay in the valley between the hills, was a world away from the stately order of the forum. Here, streets are even narrower and darker, overshadowed by towering insulae. The apartment blocks where the majority of Rome's population lived. These buildings were often poorly constructed, made of wood and mud brick, and were a constant fire hazard. Life in the insulae was cramped and unsanitary. A whole family might live in a single small room with no running water, no kitchen, and no toilet. Imagine walking through these streets. The noise is deafening, echoing off the high walls. The air is thick with the smell of humanity, of sweat, of cooking fires, of waste thrown from the windows above. The ground floors of the insulae are often given over to small workshops and taverns. You can hear the rhythmic sawing of a carpenter, the tapping of a shoemaker's hammer. It's the boisterous laughter spilling out from a crowded pepina, a working man's bar. The streets are a chaotic jumble of people, dock workers, craftsmen, shopkeepers, slaves on errands for their masters. It is a world of constant struggle, a place where life is lived on the very edge of survival. For most Romans, the midday meal was a simple, quick affair. They might buy something from a street vendor, a piece of flatbread with cheese, or a bowl of stew from a thermopolium, a Roman fast food counter. The wealthy might return home for a light lunch, but the main meal of the day was yet to come. As the afternoon wears on, the searing heat of the sun forces a change in the city's rhythm. This is the time for the siesta, the afternoon rest. The streets become quieter, the shops pull down their wooden shutters. Those who can afford to retreat into the cool, shaded interiors of their homes. It is a time for quiet conversation, for reading, or simply for sleep. This pause in the day is a necessity in the Mediterranean climate, a collective exhale before the evening's activities begin. For many Roman men, the late afternoon was a time for one of the city's most important social rituals, the visit to the public baths. The baths were not just a place to get clean. They were community centers, places to exercise, to socialize, and to do business. Imagine stepping into one of the great bath complexes. The first room you enter is the apoditerium, the changing room. Here you would leave your clothes in a small niche in the wall, under the watchful eye of a slave. From there you might proceed to the palestra, an open-air exercise yard. Here men of all ages engage in various forms of physical activity, wrestling, weightlifting, or playing a ball game called harpastum. The sounds are of grunts of effort, the thud of bodies on the sand, and the shouts of encouragement from onlookers. After exercising, the bathing ritual itself begins. It is a carefully prescribed sequence of rooms, each with a different temperature. First, the tepidarium, a warm room designed to allow the body to acclimatize and to begin to sweat. The air is humid and still. Men lie on marble benches, chatting quietly, their bodies glistening with oil. Next is the caldarium, the hot room. The heat in here is intense, generated by a sophisticated underfloor heating system called a hypocaust. The air is thick with steam. The purpose of the caldarium is to open the pores and sweat out the day's impurities. After spending time in the heat, the bather would be scraped clean with a strigil, a curved metal tool used to remove the oil, sweat, and dirt from the skin. This was often done by a slave. Finally, the bather would plunge into the frigidarium, a large pool of cold water. The shock of the cold water is invigorating, closing the pores and leaving the benner feeling refreshed and clean. The baths were a great social leveler. Men from all social classes, from senators to simple shopkeepers, could meet here on relatively equal terms. In the warm, steamy rooms, business deals were struck, political gossip was exchanged, and friendships were forged. The baths were an essential part of the fabric of Roman social life, a place where the community came together to relax and connect. As evening approaches, the city begins to stir again. The streets fill with people returning home from the baths, or from a final bit of business in the forum. For the wealthy, the evening is reserved for the cena, the dinner party. This was the most important meal of the day, and a crucial social event. Guests would arrive at the domus and be led to the triclinium. They would recline on the couches, propped up on their left elbows, while slaves served them a series of elaborate dishes. A Roman dinner party was a lengthy and theatrical affair. The food was often exotic and designed to impress. Dishes might include roasted peacock, sow's udder, or dormice cooked in honey. The wine, mixed with water, would flow freely. Entertainment was an essential part of the evening. Musicians would play the lyre or the flute, poets would recite their latest works, and dancers would perform. The conversation would be lively, ranging from politics and philosophy to the latest city gossip. The cena was an opportunity for the host to display his wealth, his culture, and his social connections. It was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to enhance his status and influence. For the vast majority of Rome's population, however, the evening meal was a much simpler affair. A family living in an insula would gather in their single room, sharing a meal of bread, vegetable stew, and perhaps a small piece of fish. They would eat quickly by the flickering light of a single oil lamp. Their world was small, confined by the walls of their apartment and the narrow street outside. As darkness falls, the city transforms once again. The streets, unlit and dangerous, become the domain of the night watch, the vigils, who patrol for fires and criminals. The respectable citizens of Rome lock themselves inside their homes. The sounds of the Datha, shouting, the hammering, the rumbling of cartza, replaced by the sounds of the night. The distant barking of a dog, the drunken singing from a tavern, the sudden cry of a victim of a street robbery. But for most, the night is a time for rest, a welcome reprieve from the toil of the day. In the small dark cubicula of the domus, and in the crowded rooms of the insulae, the people of Rome sleep, their dreams perhaps filled with the anxieties and ambitions that drove their waking hours. The city, for a few brief hours, is relatively still. Resting under the silent gaze of the moon and the stars, ready to begin the same inexorable rhythm all over again at the first light of dawn. This was the world that Cicero inhabited, a world of stark contrasts, of immense wealth and grinding poverty, of sophisticated ritual and brutal reality. It was a world where every day was a performance, and every action was freighted with social meaning. The very concept of what it meant to be Roman, of Romanatus, was a complex and constantly evolving idea, and it was deeply intertwined with the city's relationship with outsiders. Rome was not a homogeneous society. It was a magnet, drawing people from every corner of its vast and ever-expanding territories. This constant influx of new people immigrants, slaves, merchants, and fortune seekers was both the city's greatest strength and a source of constant social tension. Imagine a newly arrived provincial, perhaps a young man from a small town in Iberia, stepping into the city for the first time. He has traveled for weeks, first on foot along the great Roman roads, then perhaps by sea to the bustling port of Ostia, and finally up the Tiber River on a crowded barge. Nothing in his previous life could have prepared him for the sheer scale and overwhelming sensory experience of Rome. To him, the city is a bewildering labyrinth of stone and humanity. The noise alone is terrifying, a constant deafening roar that seems to shake the very air. The crowds are a physical force, a river of bodies that threatens to sweep him away, sees faces and hears languages he has never encountered before, some darkened Egyptians, fair-haired Gauls, fast-talking Greeks, and stern-faced legionaries back from the frontiers. He feels utterly insignificant, a tiny lost speck in this monstrous, churning metropolis. His first challenge is survival. He has no connections, no patron to guide him. He must find lodging, likely a tiny, windowless room high up in one of the creaking insulae of the Subura. The rent is exorbitant, and the conditions are squalid. He must find work, any work. He might end up as a day laborer on a construction project, his back aching under the hot sun as he hauls stones for a new temple. Or perhaps he finds a job as a porter in the market, his days spent carrying heavy loads through the jostling crowds. His life is a relentless cycle of hard labor, poor food, and the constant fear of sickness or unemployment. For this young immigrant, the path to becoming Roman is a long and arduous one. It is not simply a matter of learning the language, but of understanding the complex, unwritten rules of the social hierarchy. He must learn who to defer to, how to speak to his superiors, and how to navigate the intricate web of patronage that governs every aspect of Roman life. He might eventually save enough money to open a small shop, to join a burial society, or to buy his own freedom, if he had been forced into servitude. Out. But for many, the dream of a better life in Rome remained just that, a dream. They lived and died in the city's shadows, their names and stories lost to history. The experience of the enslaved was another far darker side of Rome's multiculturalism. The city's economy, its very way of life, was built on the foundation of slave labor. Slaves were not immigrants. They were property, brought to the city in chains as the spoils of war. Their journey to Rome was a brutal, dehumanizing ordeal. Torn from their homes and families, they were marched for hundreds of miles, branded, and sold in the slave market like livestock. Imagine the slave market in the Forum Boarium. It is a place of profound human misery, hidden in plain sight. Men, women, and children stand on wooden platforms, stripped of their clothes and their dignity. Potential buyers inspect them, checking their teeth, their muscles, their scars. Placard, a titulus, hangs around each slave's neck, listing their age, their origin, and any special skills they might possess. The air is filled with the sound of the auctioneer's call, the weeping of those being separated from their loved ones, and the cold, indifferent chatter of the buyers. Once purchased, the life of a slave depended entirely on the nature of their master and the type of work they were assigned. A slave with specialized skills, a cook, a musician, or a tutor, might lead a relatively comfortable life within a wealthy household. They would be well fed and housed, and might even develop a close, if unequal, relationship with the family they served. Cicero, for example, had a beloved and highly intelligent slave named Tiro, who served as his secretary and confidant. He eventually granted Tiro his freedom, and the two men remained close friends. But for the vast majority of slaves, life was one of unremitting hardship. Those who worked in the mines or on the great agricultural estates, the latifundia, faced a brutal, short existence. They were worked to exhaustion, poorly fed, and housed in squalid barracks. The discipline was harsh, and any act of defiance was met with brutal punishment. The constant threat of the whip was a part of their daily reality. Even for urban slaves, life was precarious. They had no legal rights, no protection from the whims of their masters. They could be bought and sold, beaten, and even killed with impunity. The family structure, so central to Roman life, was denied to them. There, children were the property of their master. Yet, within this oppressive system, slaves found ways to resist, to maintain their humanity. They formed their own secret communities, preserved their native languages and religions, and cherished the small moments of joy they could find. The hope of manumission, of being granted their freedom, was a powerful motivator, a distant glimmer of light in the darkness of their servitude. The presence of so many foreigners and slaves had a profound impact on the city's culture. Rome was a melting pot, a place where different traditions, beliefs, and artistic styles met and mingled. The city's cuisine was enriched by new ingredients and cooking techniques from across the empire. The Latin language itself was infused with loanwords from Greek and other languages. New gods and religious cults found a foothold in the city, often syncretized with the traditional Roman pantheon. The worship of the Egyptian goddess Isis, for example, became immensely popular in Rome. Her mysterious rituals offering a sense of personal connection and spiritual solace that was sometimes lacking in the more formal, state-sponsored religion. However, this cultural dynamism was also a source of anxiety for traditional Romans. They worried that the influx of foreign customs was eroding the old Roman virtues, discipline, piety, and simplicity. They feared that the luxury and decadence of the East were corrupting their society. This tension between embracing the benefits of a cosmopolitan empire and preserving a distinct Roman identity was a constant theme in the literature and political discourse at the time. Cicero himself embodied this conflict. He was a man deeply versed in Greek philosophy and literature, and he recognized the immense debt that Roman culture owed to the Greeks. Yet, he was also a staunch defender of the mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors, and he often lamented what he saw as the moral decline of his time. His life and career were a constant balancing act, an attempt to forge a new Roman identity that could be both cosmopolitan and true to its traditional roots. So, as we picture the world of Cicero's Rome, we must see it not as a monolithic, static society, but as a vibrant, chaotic, and often brutal melting pot. It was a city of insiders and outsiders, of citizens and slaves, of immense opportunity and profound despair. It was a city constantly being remade by the hopes, the dreams, and the sheer, desperate resilience of the millions who came there seeking a new life, whether by choice or by force. The story of Rome is the story of these countless, unnamed individuals. Their collective energy and suffering, the unseen foundation upon which the grand edifice of empire was built. It is within this complex, multicultural, and deeply stratified world that the personal story of a new man like Cicero, a man from a provincial town with no noble ancestry, begins to unfold. His rise would be a testament to the possibilities that Rome could offer, and his fall a tragic reminder of its inherent perils. Allow your mind to drift on this thought. The city, a living, breathing thing, full of stories, countless threads weaving together to form a single, complex tapestry. There is no need to hold on to any single thread. Just let the overall impression wash over you, the hum of life, the quiet struggles, the enduring hope. A city of stone, built by hands, filled with hearts, all beating to the same ancient rhythm of the rising and setting sun. The transition from the anonymous currents of daily life to the specific biography of one individual is like adjusting the focus of a lens. We move from the wide, sweeping panorama of the city to the close, intimate details of a single existence. The background, which we have painted with the broad strokes of Roman routine and social structure, remains essential. It is the context, the very air that our subject will breathe. But now we begin to trace the outline of a figure against this backdrop, a man whose life would both embody and challenge the world we have just explored. Marcus Tullius Cicero. His story is next. But for now, just rest. Let the sounds and sensations of his world provide a soft, steady path into your own quiet rest. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to see, just the gentle, rhythmic peace of this moment. We have wandered the streets of Rome, felt its sun, and listened to its ceaseless hum. We have seen the city as a living, breathing entity, a world of intricate rhythms and stark contrasts. Now, from this sprawling, anonymous life, we turn our focus. We gently adjust our gaze, moving from the panoramic to the particular, to trace the beginnings of a single life thread woven into this immense tapestry. A life that would begin not in the heart of the great city, but in the quiet, rolling hills of the countryside. This is the story of Marcus Tullius Cicero, a man of words in a world of stone and steel. Slight pause. Segment 2. A new man's beginning. Our story begins not with the roar of the forum, but with the scent of damp earth and the whisper of wind through olive groves. 100 kilometers or so southeast of Rome, nestled in the Volscian hills, lies the town of Arpinum. It is an old place, a town of sturdy stone and strong traditions. It is here, in the year 16, before the Common Era, that Marcus Tullius Cicero was born. Imagine this place. It is a world away from the urban chaos of Rome. The air is clearer, the sounds are softer. The dominant sound is not the clamor of crowds, but the gentle flow of the river Liris in the valley below. The distant bleating of sheep on the hillsides and the rustle of leaves in the oak forests. The town itself is built on a ridge, a natural fortress, and the surrounding land is a patchwork of family farms and villas, the source of its wealth and its identity. Cicero's family was not of the Roman senatorial aristocracy, the small, elite circle of noble families who had dominated politics for centuries. They were, instead, leading members of the local gentry, the domi nobiles of Arpinum. They belonged to the equestrian order, the class of wealthy landowners and businessmen who formed the backbone of Roman society. They had land, they had money, and they had a long and respectable lineage within their own community. But in the grand theater of Rome, they were outsiders. They were a family of consequence, but not of command. This simple fact would be the defining feature of Cicero's life. The source of his greatest ambitions and his most profound insecurities, he would forever be a novus homo, a new man, the first of his family to seek high office in Rome. His childhood home was not a grand urban domus, but a substantial country villa. Picture a solid, rambling stone house, built for comfort and practicality rather than for show. The walls are thick, keeping the interior cool in the long, hot summers. The rooms are spacious, with floors of worn terracotta tile, cool underfoot. The heart of the house is not a formal atrium, but a large, open courtyard, where much of the daily work of the estate would be overseen. The air here smells of olive oil, of wine fermenting in the cellars, of wood smoke from the kitchen, and of the fragrant herbs grown in the garden. It is a place of substance and stability, a world rooted in the predictable, reassuring cycles of the agricultural year. Cicero's father, also named Marcus, was a man of great intellect and learning. His health was frail, preventing him from pursuing the public career his talents might otherwise have earned him. So, he poured all of his ambition and his passion for knowledge into his two sons, Marcus and the younger Quintus. Imagine him in his study, a quiet, shaded room lined with shelves of papyrus scrolls. He is a man who finds his power not in the forum, but in the library. He reads voraciously history, poetry, philosophy. He believes, with all his being, in the transformative power of a Roman education, an education that could equip his sons to achieve the greatness that he himself could not. It was he who made the pivotal decision that his boys would not be educated as provincial landowners, but as future leaders of Rome. His mother Helvia was a woman from a good equestrian family, a classic Roman matrona. She was, by all accounts, a capable and thrifty manager of the household, a grounding, practical presence in a family of intellectual men. She ran the large and complex estate with a firm but fair hand, overseeing the slaves, managing the accounts, and ensuring the smooth, orderly rhythm of domestic life. She represents the old traditional virtues of the Roman countryside, a foundation of stability upon which her son's soaring ambitions would be built. And then there was Quintus, Marcus's younger brother. From their earliest days, the two boys were inseparable, their lives intertwined in a bond of deep affection and occasional rivalry. Marcus was the more cerebral, the more sensitive, the one who lived in the world of ideas. Quintus was more practical, more impulsive, a man of action with a soldier's temperament. Throughout their lives, they would be each other's greatest supporters, and at times, their most astute critics. Their constant correspondence, much of which survives to this day, offers a quiet, intimate window into their shared world. It was from this stable, prosperous, and intellectually charged environment in Arpinum that the two boys were taken to Rome to begin their formal education. For young Marcus, the move must have been a profound shock. Imagine leaving the green, open spaces of the countryside for the cramped, noisy, overwhelming reality of the city. The family had a house in a respectable neighborhood on the Esquiline Hill, but it was still a world of narrow streets, towering insulae, and of a relentless, churning sea of humanity. Their education did not take place in a single building we would recognize as a school. Rather, it was a carefully curated journey through a series of mentors and experiences, all orchestrated by their father. The first and most crucial step was to master the languages of power and culture, Latin and Greek. They were placed under the tutelage of the Greek poet Archias. Picture a small, sunlit room in their Roman home. The boys are seated on simple wooden stools before their tutor. Archias is not just teaching them a language. He is opening a door to another world. He reads from the great Greek poets. From Homer and Euripides, his voice fills the room, the musical, unfamiliar cadence of the Greek language a kind of incantation. Your boys learn to read from papyrus scrolls, their fingers carefully unrolling the brittle sheets. Imagine the texture of the papyrus, the slightly rough surface, the faint, dry, papery scent. They learn to write with a reed pen, dipping it in ink made from soot and gum, carefully forming the elegant Greek letters on a fresh sheet. For Cicero, this was not a chore, it was an awakening. He fell in love with the beauty of the language, with the power of the stories, and with the depth of the philosophical ideas they contained. This early immersion in Greek culture would shape his mind for the rest of his life. But a Roman education was not merely about books. It was practical, designed to prepare a young man for a life of public service. The next stage of their training was the Tirocinium Fori, the apprenticeship of the Forum. This was a uniquely Roman institution. A boy, upon coming of age and donning the toga virilis, the plain white toga of an adult citizen, would be attached to an older, distinguished public figure. He would follow this man like a shadow, observing him in his daily life, learning by watching. Cicero and his brother were placed under the mentorship of Lucius Licinius Crassus, one of the greatest orators of his generation. Imagine the two teenage boys, standing silently at the back of a crowded basilica in the Roman Forum. The air is hot and thick with the smell of dust and sweat. They are surrounded by the constant low murmur of the crowd. At the front of the hall, Crassus is delivering a speech in a complex legal case. His voice is a powerful instrument, rising and falling, persuading, reasoning, and commanding the attention of the judges. For Cicero, this was the ultimate classroom. He was not just hearing a speech, he was witnessing the art of persuasion in action. He watched how Crassus used a gesture to emphasize a point, how he paused for effect, how he built an argument. Brick by logical brick, until it was an unassailable fortress. He was learning the craft that would become the foundation of his own career. He would also follow Crassus to his home, listening to the conversations he had with other leading men of the state. In the quiet of Crassus's peristyle garden, surrounded by the scent of flowers and the gentle sound of a fountain, the young Cicero would hear discussions of politics, of military strategy, of the latest news from the provinces. He was being initiated into the inner workings of the Roman state, absorbing the nuances of power, the unspoken codes of conduct, and the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined the Roman elite. Alongside this practical apprenticeship in rhetoric, Cicero undertook a more formal study of the law. This was a different kind of learning, a world away from the performative art of the Forum. Picture Cicero in Scaevola's library, a quiet, orderly space filled with the scrolls of Roman law. The 12 tables, the foundational legal code, and the countless commentaries and statutes that had been added over the centuries. The work here was slow, methodical, and intellectually rigorous. Scaevola would pose a legal problem, a hypothetical case, and his students would debate the various interpretations of the law. The atmosphere was one of quiet contemplation, of pure, dispassionate logic. It was here that Cicero sharpened his analytical mind, learning to dissect an argument, to identify its weaknesses, and to construct a case based on precedent and reason. He was acquiring the two essential skills of a Roman advocate, the logical rigor of the jurist and the persuasive flair of the orator. This period of intense study was interrupted by a brief but formative experience of military life. At the age of 17, it was compulsory for a young man of his class to serve in the army. Cicero was attached to the staff of Gnaeus Pompeius Strabo, the father of the famous Pompey the Great, during the Social War, a brutal civil conflict between Rome and its Italian allies. Cicero was not a natural soldier. His experience was not one of heroic combat on the front lines. Imagine him instead in the commander's tent, a space that smells of leather, canvas, and oiled metal. His role is administrative. He's learning about logistics, about supply chains. It's about the immense organizational effort required to keep a Roman army in the field. He is an observer, watching the grim realities of war from a slight distance. He sees the discipline of the legions, but he also sees the suffering, the destruction, and the deep political divisions that have torn the Republic apart. This experience gave him a lifelong aversion to civil war, and a profound appreciation for the fragile nature of peace and political stability. After his military service, Cicero returned to his studies. But his world, and the world of Rome, had been irrevocably changed. The civil wars continued, culminating in the rise of the dictator Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla's victory was followed by the proscriptions, a terrifying period of state-sanctioned murder. Lists of Sulla's political enemies were posted in the forum, and anyone on the list could be killed with impunity, their property confiscated by the state. It was a time of fear and suspicion, when an unguarded word could lead to a death sentence. It was in this tense and dangerous atmosphere that the 26-year-old Cicero decided to launch his career as a legal advocate. He took on a case that no established lawyer would touch, a case that would either make his name or end his life before it had truly begun. This was the defense of Sextus Rosciers of Amaria. Let us not dwell on the grisly details of the crime, but on the quiet courage of the young lawyer. Rosciers was accused of murdering his own father. The charge was parricide, the most heinous crime in Roman law. The punishment for which was to be sewn into a sack with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, and thrown into the Tiber. But everyone knew that Rosciers was innocent. The real culprits were two of his relatives, who had conspired with a powerful freedman of Sulla, named Chrysogonus, to have the elder Roscius' name added to the proscription lists after the fact. They had murdered him, seized his valuable estates, and were now attempting to eliminate the rightful heir by accusing him of the crime. To defend Rosciers meant to publicly challenge Chrysogonus, Sulla's powerful favorite. It meant speaking truth to power in a city that was paralyzed by fear. Imagine Cicero in the days and weeks leading up to the trial. The long nights spent in his study, the room lit by a single flickering oil lamp. The only sounds are the scratching of his stylus on a wax tablet and the soft rustle of papyrus scrolls as he and his clerks search for legal precedents. He is not just preparing a legal argument. He is carefully crafting a political tightrope walk. He must expose the guilt of Chrysogonus and the relatives without directly attacking the dictator Sulla, whose authority was absolute. Picture the day of the trial. Courthouse is packed. The air is heavy with anticipation and a palpable sense of danger. The young, unknown lawyer from Arpinum rises to speak. His voice at first is quiet, almost hesitant. He is not the thundering orator of the grand political stage. He is a careful, precise logician. He begins by acknowledging the authority of Sulla, praising his wisdom in bringing order back to the state. He frames his argument not as an attack on the regime, but as an appeal to its own stated principles of justice. Then, slowly, methodically, he begins to dismantle the prosecution's case. He lays out the evidence, piece by piece. He exposes the inconsistencies in the accuser's stories. His voice gains strength and confidence as he proceeds. He is not using flamboyant rhetoric. He is using the cold, hard weapon of logic. He paints a picture of a conspiracy, of greed and corruption, of powerful men preying on the weak. He turns the case into a test of the very soul of the new Sullan order. Would it be a regime of law or one of arbitrary tyranny? By the end of the speech, he had achieved the impossible. He had not only convinced the judges of Rosciers' innocence, but had done so without giving Sulla any pretext to move against him. Rosciers was acquitted. And in a single morning, Marcus Tullius, Cicero, had become one of the most famous lawyers in Rome. The victory, however, came at a cost. He had made powerful enemies. The city, under the shadow of Sulla's continued rule, was not a safe place for a young man who had so publicly challenged one of the dictator's favorites. Pleading ill health and the need for further education, convenient and plausible excuses Cicero left Rome. He embarked on what we might call a grand tour of the intellectual centers of the Greek world, a 2-year journey that would be the final polishing stage of his long education. His first stop was Athens. Imagine Cicero, now a man in his late 20s, walking through the city that was the birthplace of the philosophy and rhetoric he so admired. It is no longer the powerful political capital it once was, but it is still the intellectual heart of the Mediterranean world. He walks through the ruins of the Acropolis, the marble still brilliant in the Greek sunlight. He visits the Academy, the school founded by Plato, now a quiet grove of olive trees. He walks in the Lyceum, where Aristotle once taught. The air itself seems to be thick with the ghosts of great ideas. Here, he He is not a lawyer or a politician, but a student once more. He sits at the feet of the philosopher Antiochus of Ashkelon, engaging in calm, reasoned debates about the nature of virtue, the structure of the cosmos, and the meaning of a good life. It is a time of profound intellectual nourishment, a quiet interlude that deepens his philosophical understanding and provides him with the intellectual framework that will underpin his political thought for the rest of his life. From Athens, he travels to the island of Rhodes, a thriving commercial and rhetorical center. Here, he seeks out the most famous teacher of oratory in the world, Apollonius Molon. Cicero's early speaking style, the style he had used in the Rosciers case, was effective, but it was physically draining. It was part of the Asiatic school of rhetoric, passionate, florid, and often verbose. Molon was a proponent of a more controlled, restrained style. Picture the scene of his training. It is not in a stuffy classroom, but perhaps on a cliffside overlooking the sparkling Aegean Sea. Molon is teaching Cicero how to control his voice, how to use his breath, how to stand and move with quiet authority. He is teaching him that the most effective rhetoric is not always the loudest. It is about discipline, about structure, about making every word and every gesture count. Cicero practices for hours, his voice carrying out over the water, learning to moderate his youthful exuberance, to channel his passion into a more powerful and sustainable form of oratory. This training in Rhodes was the final piece of his education. He had arrived a promising young speaker. He would leave a master of his craft. When Sulla died in 78 BC, the political climate in Rome began to change. It was now safe for Cicero to return. He was 30 years old, and he was ready to begin his political career in earnest. He was ready to climb the cursus honorum, the prescribed sequence of public offices that was the path to political power. His first step was to run for the office of quaesta, the lowest rung on the ladder. It was an entry-level position, primarily concerned with financial administration. Imagine him now, not as a student or a lawyer, but as a political candidate. Campaigns in the forum, his white toga specially cleaned and chalked to make it stand out. Shakes hands. He remembers names. He calls in favors from the friends and allies he has made, and he is successful. He's elected quaestor and is assigned by lot to serve in the province of Sicily. Sicily was the breadbasket of Rome, a vital source of the grain that fed the city's massive population. The role of the quaestor there was crucial. It was a job that offered many opportunities for corruption, for an ambitious young man to enrich himself at the expense of the provincials. Cicero took a different path. Picture him in his office in Lilybaeum, a port city on the western coast of Sicily. The room is simple, functional. The air is warm and carries the salty scent of the sea. His desk is covered not with books of philosophy, but with ledgers and account books. His days are spent in quiet, meticulous work. He oversees the collection of taxes. He manages the purchase and shipment of grain. He adjudicates commercial disputes, travels through the province, not in a grand entourage, but with a small staff, meeting with local farmers and merchants. He listens to their concerns. He develops a reputation for being honest, fair, and incredibly diligent. This experience was invaluable. It taught him the practical realities of governing. He was no longer just a theorist. He was an administrator responsible for the well-being of thousands of people. And his time in Sicily earned him something more valuable than money. It earned him a reputation dignitas. The Sicilians, so often exploited by Roman officials, came to trust and admire him. They would become a loyal base of political support for him in the years to come. And in Rome, the reports of his competent and honest administration were noted by the senior figures in the Senate. He had proven himself to be a serious, capable man. The new man from Arpinum had successfully completed the first stage of his political ascent. He returned to Rome a more mature and confident man. He was no longer just a brilliant lawyer. He was a senator with practical experience in government. His path seemed clear, stretching out before him like one of the great straight Roman roads he had traveled. He had built a foundation, solid and carefully constructed, of education, legal victory, and public service. He was a man on the rise, his ambition a quiet but powerful engine driving him forward. The city, which had once been a bewildering and dangerous place, was now his stage. But the stones of Rome hold many stories, and the foundations of power, are not always as stable as they appear. Cicero's life was recorded not just in the memory of his contemporaries, but in the physical objects he left behind in his voluminous letters, speeches, and philosophical works, copied and recopied by scribes down through the centuries. We know his story because he was a man of words, and his words survived. Yet there is another, more silent record of his world, a record that lies buried beneath the modern city, the marble floors he walked upon, the coins he handled, the foundations of the temples and basilicas where he spoke. These fragments are unearthed by the patient work of archaeologists, offering a tangible connection to his reality. They are pieces of a grand, forgotten puzzle. How do these silent stones speak to us? How do we reconstruct a vibrant, living world from the quiet, broken remnants of the past? That is a different kind of story, a story of discovery, of mystery, and of the enduring conversation between the present and the distant past. We left our subject, Marcus Tullius Cicero, at a moment of quiet triumph. A man in his prime, returning to Rome from his service in Sicily, his reputation for integrity and diligence preceding him, he has laid the foundations of his career with meticulous care. Path of ambition, the cursus honorum, stretches before him. But to understand the world he sought to conquer, we must look beyond the man himself. We must look at the silent witnesses of his age, the stones, the artifacts, and the very ideas that formed the air he breathed. Let us now drift away from the narrative of his life for a moment and explore the physical and intellectual landscape of his world, a world we can still touch, in fragments, today. Imagine yourself not as a person, but as a silent observer, unbound by time. You can drift through the solid walls of the past and witness the city as Cicero knew it. But you can also see the present, the layers of time that have accumulated over the millennia. You can see the ruins of the Roman Forum as they stand today, a pale and broken skeleton of what they once were. And it is here, in the dialogue between the vibrant past and the quiet present, that we find a different kind of story. Let us stand in the Forum again. In Cicero's time, this was not a place of gentle, sun-drenched ruins. It was a riot of color, sound, and life. The great basilicas, the Basilica Aemilia and the Basilica Sempronia, were not empty shells, but vast covered halls.
Ow.
Their roofs were tiled with terracotta, and their interiors were a forest of columns. The marble was not the stark, bleached white we see today. It was painted in rich, vibrant colors. Reds, blues, and golds would have adorned the capitals of the columns and the intricate carvings of the friezes. Imagine the sunlight slanting through the high, clear-storied windows, illuminating a space that hummed with the business of an empire. The air inside would have been cooler than the street, smelling of stone dust and the faint perfume of the wealthy citizens who gathered there. The temples, too, were a dazzling sight. The Temple of Saturn, whose 8 iconic columns still stand today, was the site of the state treasury. Its vaults, deep beneath the stone platform, held the vast wealth of Rome gold, silver, and the official records of the state. The building itself would have been covered in fine white stucco, polished to gleam like solid marble. Bronze plaques and gilded statues would have adorned its facade, catching the sun and reflecting its light across the open square. Now, let your gaze drift downward, to the very stones under your feet. The paving of the Forum was not a single uniform surface. It was a patchwork of different stones, laid down over centuries. The oldest layers are of rough, dark volcanic tufa. Later came the smooth, gray travertine, and in the most sacred areas, imported marble. Each layer is a sentence in the long story of the city's growth. Imagine the archaeologist, centuries later, carefully brushing away the layers of earth. Each fragment of pottery, each lost coin they find is a clue, a single word from a forgotten language. A coin, for instance, is not just money. It is a piece of propaganda, a tiny, portable sculpture that communicates a message. In Cicero's time, the coins were minted by junior magistrates, would often put images of their own ancestors on them, a way of advertising their family's glorious past. A coin found in the dirt of the Forum might show the profile of an ancient hero, a depiction of a famous naval victory, or a symbol of a priestly college. To hold such a coin in your hand is to touch a direct link to that world, to feel the same weight and texture that a Roman shopkeeper or senator would have felt as they went about their day. And what of the words themselves? The Romans were a profoundly literate people, and they carved inscriptions onto everything. Stone was their permanent record. On the base of a statue, you would find the name and titles of the person it honored. On a public building, a great stone plaque would dedicate the structure to the gods and the people of Rome, and would name the magistrate who had paid for its construction. Even the tombstones that lined the great roads leading out of the city told a story. They gave the name of the deceased, their age, their profession, and often a short, poignant message to the living. "Stranger, do not pass me by without reading," one might say. These inscriptions, carved with beautiful, precise lettering, are the voices of the past, speaking to us directly across the centuries. But the vast majority of the words written in Cicero's time were not carved in stone. They were written on papyrus, a fragile organic material that rarely survives the damp European climate. And this brings us to one of the great quiet mysteries of the ancient world, the library of lost books. Imagine Cicero in his own library. He had several in his various villas, and he loved them more than almost anything. Picture a room, not grand, but comfortable. The walls are lined with wooden cabinets called armoria. Each cabinet is filled with pigeonholes, and in each pigeonhole is a papyrus scroll. Each scroll has a small bone or wooden tag, a syllabus, hanging from its end, bearing the title and author of the work. The air smells faintly of cedar oil, which was used to protect the papyrus from insects. Here, Cicero would have had not only the great works of Greek literature and philosophy, but also the works of his Roman contemporaries. He would have had the histories of Cato the Elder, the plays of Ennius, the poetry of Lucilius. These were the foundational texts of Roman literature, works that every educated Roman knew. And yet today, they are almost entirely lost. We know them only from fragments, quoted in the works of other authors, like Cicero himself. It is as if we had lost Shakespeare and knew his plays only from a few famous lines quoted in a dictionary. The loss of these books is not a dramatic sudden event. It is a story of slow, quiet decay. It is the story of a scroll not being copied when it became too old and brittle. It is the story of a library fire, a flood, or simply the slow, inexorable nibbling of insects and mold. For every scroll that survived, thousands perished. The literature we have from the ancient world is but a tiny, random sample of what once existed. It is a sobering thought, a reminder of the fragility of knowledge in the vast, silent ocean of what we have lost. One of the most tantalizing of these lost treasures is a work by Cicero himself, his Hortensius. This was a philosophical dialogue written later in his life, which he argued for the importance of philosophy as the guide to a happy and virtuous life. We know from the testimony of others, like St. Augustine, that this book had a profound impact on those who read it. It was a gateway to philosophy for generations of Roman readers, yet not a single copy survives. We can only imagine its quiet, persuasive arguments, its elegant prose, its passionate defense of the life of the mind. Its loss is a silent space in our understanding of Cicero's intellectual world. The mystery of lost texts finds its most dramatic physical form in the town of Herculaneum, buried in the same volcanic eruption that destroyed Pompeii. Here, in a grand villa, archaeologists discovered a library. The scrolls were still in their shelves, but they were not readable. They had been carbonized by the intense heat of the eruption, turned into brittle, blackened cylinders of charcoal. For centuries, they were untouchable, their secrets locked away. Imagine the quiet, patient work of modern scientists. They are not unrolling these scrolls, which would cause them to crumble into dust. They are using advanced imaging technology, particle accelerators, and powerful X-rays to scan the scrolls without ever opening them. They are learning to read the faint traces of the ink, which was made with a different density of carbon than the papyrus itself. Slowly, painstakingly, letter by letter, they are beginning to decipher these lost texts. Most of them are dry, technical works of Epicurean philosophy, but each word recovered is a small victory against the silence of time. A faint whisper from a library that was thought to be lost forever. This is the world of archaeology and philology. It is not a world of grand adventure, but of quiet, methodical patience. It is the work of piecing together a shattered mosaic from a few scattered tiles. It is about listening with great attention to the faint echoes of the past. Whether they are found in the layers of dirt beneath a city, the chisel marks on a stone, or the faint ghostly traces of ink on a carbonized scroll. The philosophy that Cicero studied was not an abstract academic discipline, it was a practical guide to life. The major schools of thought, Stoicism, Epicureanism, and the academic skepticism, that Cicero himself favored all, offered answers to the most fundamental questions. What is a good life? How should one face adversity? What is our duty to ourselves and to our community? Imagine a young Roman nobleman like Cicero trying to decide which philosophical path to follow. He might be drawn to Stoicism, with its emphasis on duty, self-control, and the acceptance of fate. The Stoic ideal was to live in accordance with nature and reason, to be unmoved by the passions of fear and desire. It was a philosophy that resonated deeply with the traditional Roman values of discipline and public service. Or he might be attracted to the quieter, more withdrawn world of Epicureanism. The Epicureans taught that the goal of life was tranquility, ataraxia, which was to be achieved by living a simple life, surrounded by friends, and avoiding the pain and anxiety of public ambition. They did not believe in an afterlife or the intervention of the gods in human affairs. Theirs was a philosophy for the private garden, not the public square. Cicero himself was an academic skeptic. This did not mean that he believed in nothing. It meant that he believed that true certainty was impossible to achieve, and that the wise man should therefore be prepared to argue both sides of any question and to accept the most probable answer as a provisional guide for action. It was a philosophy that suited his legal and political mind, a way of thinking that was flexible, pragmatic, and deeply engaged with the complexities of the world. These philosophical ideas were not just debated in schools. They infused the culture. They shaped the way a Roman senator thought about his duty to the state, the way a general faced the prospect of his own death, and the way a poet wrote about love and loss. The silent stones of the forum and the whispering scrolls of the libraries were part of a single, continuous conversation, a grand, centuries-long effort to understand what it meant to be human in a vast and often chaotic universe. And so, as Cicero returns to Rome to continue his ascent, he does so within this rich and complex world. He is a man shaped by its literature, guided by its philosophy, and ambitious to make his own mark on its stone and on its memory. He is a product of this culture, and he will become one of its most eloquent and enduring voices. His personal story is inseparable from the great, silent story of the world he inhabited, a world of both immense, tangible presence and vast, mysterious absence. And it is to his personal story, his navigation of the highest echelons of this society, that we now gently return. Having returned from Sicily with his reputation enhanced, Cicero was no longer a mere outsider. He was a senator, a man of proven ability, a rising star. He now moved within the highest circles of Roman society, a world of immense wealth, ancient lineage, and carefully guarded power. This was the world of the Roman elite, and its rhythms and rituals were as complex and demanding as any legal code. Let us contrast the daily life of this elite with that of the ordinary citizens we have already observed. The day for a man like Cicero, or for the patrician nobles he now mingled with, still began at dawn with the salutatio. But now, he was not only a patron to his own humbler clients, he was also, in a sense, a client himself, two men who were even more powerful. The web of obligation and influence was intricate and all-encompassing. A visit to the home of a senior senator, a quiet word of support from a powerful faction leader, these were the currencies of power. Traded in the cool, formal atriums of the great houses on the Palatine Hill, imagine one of these houses, a world away from the simple country villa of Cicero's youth, or the cramped insulae of the Subura. The domos of a great patrician family was a palace. The mosaics on the floors were not simple geometric patterns, but breathtaking works of art, depicting complex mythological scenes with the subtlety and detail of a painting. The walls were not just frescoed, but were often adorned with imported Greek marble, cut into thin veneers and polished to a mirror shine. The peristyle garden was not a small, simple courtyard, but a vast private park, filled with rare and exotic plants, elaborate fountains, and a collection of Greek statues that served as both decoration and a conspicuous display of the owneress culture and wealth. The air in these houses was different, quieter, more rarefied, scented with incense and expensive perfumes. The life of the matrona in such a household was also one of stark contrast. She was not personally engaged in the weaving or the grinding of grain. Her role was that of a CEO, managing a vast and complex domestic enterprise, often with a staff of hundreds of slaves. Her day was filled with a different kind of work: the careful planning of social events, the management of the family's social calendar, and the cultivation of the relationships that would advance her husband's career and secure advantageous marriages for her children. She was the guardian of the family's reputation, a role of immense, if indirect, power. The great social ritual of this world was the cena, the evening dinner party. We have already pictured a comfortable dinner, but for the super-rich, this was an event of staggering extravagance and theatricality. Imagine Cicero as a guest at such a banquet. He arrives at the appointed hour not on foot but carried in a litter, couch suspended on poles and borne by 8 strong slaves. He is escorted to the triclinium, a dining room of opulent splendor. The couches are not simple wooden frames, but are inlaid with ivory, tortoiseshell, and precious metals. The meal itself is a carefully orchestrated performance, designed to awe and impress. It is not simply about food, but about spectacle. Dish after dish is brought out on massive silver platters. There might be sows udders stuffed with sea urchins, peacocks served with their feathers reattached, or elaborate constructions of pastry designed to look like famous buildings. Exotic ingredients are imported from the furthest corners of the empire: oysters from Britain, flamingo tongues, rare spices from the east. The wine, a fine Falernian vintage, is served by beautiful, young, and perfectly trained slaves. The entertainment is just as lavish. Between courses, acrobats might perform, or a troupe of Greek actors might present a scene from a play. A famous poet might be invited to recite his latest work. The conversation is the real heart of the event. It is a delicate dance of wit, flattery, and veiled political maneuvering. A joke can signal an alliance. A seemingly casual question can probe for weakness. Cicero, the new man, had to master this world. He had to be charming, witty, and learned, but never appear to be trying too hard. He had to navigate the subtle currents of envy and condescension from the old noble families, who might admire his talent, but would never forget that he was not one of them. It was in this environment that Cicero continued his political climb. He was elected aedile, an office responsible for public works and games. This was a crucial step, as it required him to curry favor with the populace. An aedile was expected to spend lavishly from his own pocket to put on public festivals and gladiatorial games. For a man like Cicero, who did not have the vast inherited wealth of the patrician class, this was a significant financial burden. But he managed it skillfully, putting on games that were impressive enough to be remembered, but not so extravagant as to appear fiscally reckless. His next step was the praetorship, a senior judicial office. He was now one of the chief magistrates of the state, presiding over the law courts where he had once made his name as an advocate. Imagine him now, seated on the magistrate's chair, the cella curialis, in the basilica. He is no longer the impassioned advocate, but the calm, impartial judge who listens to the arguments. He weighs the evidence, and he delivers his verdict. His reputation for fairness and legal expertise grows. He is now only one step away from the ultimate prize, the goal he and his father had dreamed of back in the quiet hills of Arpinum: the consulship. The consulship was the highest office in the Roman Republic. 2 consuls were elected each year, and for that year they were the supreme heads of state, commanding the armies and presiding over the Senate. For a novus homo to achieve this office was exceedingly rare. It had not happened for over a generation. Old noble families formed a tight-knit clique, a nobility of office, who considered the consulship their exclusive property. In the year 64 BC, Cicero began his campaign for the consulship. It was a grueling, year-long process. His brother Quintus wrote him a long letter of advice on how to conduct his campaign, a fascinating document that survives to this day. He reminds Cicero of his strengths, his unparalleled eloquence, his reputation for integrity, his wide network of friends and allies. But he also reminds him of his weaknesses, his lack of noble ancestry, and the deep-seated snobbery of the elite. Remember, Quintus writes, that you are a new man. You must be constantly on your guard, constantly working, constantly reminding people of who you are and what you have achieved. Imagine the campaign. Cicero is a constant presence in the forum. He wears the toga candida, a toga specially whitened with chalk to make him stand out, the origin of our word candidate. He has a special slave, a nomenclator, whose job it is to whisper in his ear the names of the citizens he meets, so that he can greet them personally. He gives speeches, he makes promises, he attends endless meetings and banquets. He calls in every favor he is owed. He navigates a complex political landscape, forming a temporary alliance with one of his rivals, the boorish but well-connected Gaius Antonius Hybrota, to defeat the more dangerous threat posed by another candidate, the disaffected and radical patrician, Lucius Sergius Catilina. The effort pays off. When the votes are counted, Marcus Tullius Cicero is declared the senior consul for the year 63 BC. He has reached the summit. The boy from Arpinum, the new man, is now the head of the Roman state. It is the single greatest achievement of his life. But his year in office would be defined by a crisis that would test him to his limits and would, in many ways, mark the beginning of his long, slow fall. This was the conspiracy of Catiline. Catiline was a man of immense charisma and deep grievances. A patrician from an old but impoverished family, he had been thwarted in his own political ambitions. He gathered around him a motley crew of the discontented other bankrupt nobles, debt-ridden farmers, and disaffected veterans. His plan was simple and brutal: to assassinate the consuls, set fire to the city, and seize power in the ensuing chaos. Let us not focus on the drama of the conspiracy, but on the quiet, methodical way in which Cicero, the consul, dealt with it. This was not a problem to be solved with a single brilliant speech, but with patient, painstaking intelligence work. Imagine Cicero in his house late at night. The city outside is quiet, but within these walls there is a tense, focused energy. Messengers come and go, bringing him reports from his network of spies and informants. He reads letters, he interviews witnesses, he pieces together the fragments of the plot. He is a detective, a spy master, a man trying to save the Republic from within. The crisis came to a head in the Senate. Cicero had enough evidence to act, but he needed to expose the conspiracy to the public and secure the backing of the other senators. He convened the Senate in the Temple of Jupiter Stator, a defensible position on the Palatine Hill. Catiline, with astonishing audacity, attended the meeting. Picture the scene. The senators are gathered in the dim, solemn interior of the temple. The air is thick with tension and fear. Cicero rises to speak. This is the moment for which his entire life's training has prepared him. But his speech is not a flamboyant display of rhetoric. It is a cold, precise, and devastating indictment. He lays out the evidence of the plot, addressing Catiline directly. "How long, Catiline, will you abuse our patience?" he begins. He details Catiline's plans, his associates, the very locations of his secret meetings. As he speaks, the senators sitting near Catiline begin to edge away from him, leaving him isolated on his bench. The power of Cicero's words, backed by the undeniable weight of his evidence, creates a visible physical space around the conspirator. Humiliated and exposed, Catiline flees the city to join his army, which was gathering in the north. The conspirators who remained in Rome were then caught red-handed. Through an ingenious trap involving a delegation of Gallic tribesmen, Cicero had them arrested and brought before the Senate. Now he faced the most difficult decision of his career. What was to be done with them? They were Roman citizens, and under Roman law, they could not be executed without a trial. But to hold a trial would be slow and dangerous, giving their allies a chance to rescue them or to stir up the populace. The Senate debated the question. Most senators were in favor of the ultimate penalty. But one man, a rising young politician named Gaius Julius Caesar, argued for a more lenient and legally correct course of life imprisonment. Finally, Cato the Younger, a man of unbending Stoic principle, gave a powerful speech arguing for execution, and the Senate was swayed. Cicero, as consul, now had to carry out the sentence. Imagine him that night. He personally leads the conspirators from their prison to the Tullianum, a grim underground execution chamber. He does not delegate the task, he oversees it himself. It is a grim, solemn business. There is no ceremony, no crowd, just the quiet, efficient work of the state protecting itself. When it is over, he walks out into the forum and announces to the waiting crowd a single archaic word: Vixerent, they've lived. the crisis was over, the absolute zenith of his power and popularity. He had, through his own vigilance and courage, saved the Republic. But in the quiet of his own mind, a seed of doubt may have been planted. In his haste to save the state, had he broken its most sacred law? Had he, in executing Roman citizens without a trial, sown the wind from which he would later reap the whirlwind? The years that followed were a slow, painful anticlimax. The great political forces of the age of the ambition of Pompey, the wealth of Crassus, or the genius of Caesar were now coalescing into an unofficial alliance that would come to be known as the First Triumvirate. These three men, through their combined military power and political influence, now effectively controlled the state. In this new world of strongmen, a man like Cicero, whose only power was his voice and his authority as a statesman, found himself increasingly marginalized. His great enemy, the tribune Publius Clodius Pulcher, a man he had once antagonized in a court case, saw his opportunity. Clodius passed a law retroactively that outlawed any man who had executed a Roman citizen without a trial. The law was aimed squarely at Cicero. His great moment of triumph had become the instrument of his downfall. His friends and allies, intimidated by the power of the triumvirs, deserted him. In 58 BC, abandoned and heartbroken, Marcus Tullius Cicero was forced into exile. He spent over a year away from Italy, a time of profound depression and despair. Imagine him in a provincial city in Greece, a place he had once visited as a confident and curious student.
Oh, yeah.
He is a broken man. He writes endless, sorrowful letters to his friend Atticus and to his family, lamenting his fate, blaming his enemies, and wallowing in self-pity. The man of words is consumed by his own rhetoric of despair. His grand house in Rome is torn down, its property confiscated. It seems as though his life, his career, his very memory is being erased. Eventually, through the shifting political tides and the tireless work of his friends, Cicero was recalled from exile. He returned to a hero's welcome, the streets lined with cheering crowds. But it was a hollow victory. The republic he had known, the republic he had saved, was fading away. The power of the triumvirs was absolute. The old system of laws and free debate was becoming a mere facade. The rest of his life was a struggle to remain relevant, to find a place for his principles in a world that no longer seemed to value them. He wrote some of his greatest philosophical works during this time, retreating into his library as the world outside became increasingly alien to him. He lived to see the Republic collapse into another round of brutal civil war, this time between Pompey and Caesar. He watched, with the sorrow of a grieving father, as the state he had dedicated his life to tore itself apart. After Caesar's assassination, Cicero enjoyed one last brief moment in the sun. In the power vacuum that followed, he became the de facto leader of the Senate, launching a series of brilliant, savage speeches, the Philippics against Mark Antony, whom he saw as the greatest threat to a restored republic. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though his words might still have the power to shape the world. But it was not to be. A new triumvirate was formed between Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, and this time there was no room for a man like Cicero. His name was at the very top of their prescription list. Antony would not forgive the Philippics. He tried to flee, but he was old, tired, and indecisive. He was eventually caught by Antony's soldiers near his seaside villa at Formia. The story goes that he met his end with a quiet dignity that had often eluded him in life. He ordered his slaves to set down his litter and not to resist. He looked his executioners in the eye and offered them his neck. His head and his hands, the sources of the words that had so offended Antony, were cut off and taken back to Rome. They were nailed to the rostra. The speaker's platform in the forum, the very place from which he had delivered his greatest speeches. It was a final brutal act of symbolic vengeance, a message to all that the age of free speech was over. The age of the emperors was about to begin. And so our story ends. The rise and fall of Marcus Tullius Cicero is more than just the biography of one man. It is the story of the end of an era. It is the story of a man of principle, trying to survive in a world of ruthless power politics. A man of words in an age of swords. Let us return one last time to the ruins of the Roman Forum. It is quiet now. The shouts of the crowd, the voice of the orator, the clash of steel, they are all gone. There is only the gentle sound of the wind sighing through the broken columns. Stones are warm from the afternoon sun. The tourists who wander through these ruins see only a shadow of the world that once was. But if you listen closely, in the quiet space between the past and the present, you can almost hear the echoes. The echo of a young boy from Arpanum, dreaming of greatness. The echo of a lawyer's voice, speaking truth to power. The echo of a consul, saving his country. And the echo of an old man meeting his fate with quiet courage. Cicero's ultimate legacy was not in the political battles he won or lost. It was in his words, his letters, his speeches, his philosophical works. They survived. They were copied by monks in medieval monasteries, rediscovered by scholars in the Renaissance. They became one of the foundational pillars of Western thought. Through his writings, he taught generations how to think, how to argue, and how to believe in the power of reason and justice, even in the darkest of times. The world he knew is gone, buried under layers of time and earth. But the questions he asked are still with us. What does it mean to be a good citizen? What do we owe our community? What is the price of freedom? These are the questions that echo still in the quiet of the ruins. And now, there is nothing more to do. The story is told, let it go. Let the images of ancient Rome, of togas and temples, of ambition and despair gently fade. Let them become a soft, distant landscape for your mind to rest upon. Feel the weight of your own body, the gentle rise and fall of your own breath. You are here now, in this quiet, peaceful moment. Let the silence of the past merge with the stillness of your room, and allow yourself to drift, untethered and at peace, into the deep and restorative quiet of sleep.